process going. So to the best of my knowledge, no corruption or deliberate undermining of the airline took place during that time, and if Mr. Kachalia has alternate information, he should make that information available to us. But let me also comment on his remark about somebody or the acting CEO, former acting CEO being rewarded. Well, nobody was rewarded as far as I'm concerned. There was a process in Transnet to hire executives in order to create a new management team that would take Transnet further. And in their wisdom, the board and the CEO of Transnet, with whom we had no actually dealings in respect of these appointments, chose to appoint a whole set of executives in order to work with the new CEO and take Transnet further on. So as we stand, there's nothing before us which suggests that we need to take any particular action, but we will continue to monitor the situation and continue with whatever diagnosis is possible at this point in time to establish whether there is any reason to consider such actions. Thank you.
Thank you. The next follow-up question will come from the Honorable Piri from the ANC on virtual. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Continue.
Honorable Minister, we note the department's concern on the employees' welfare of the airline. However, employees we have witnessed them being marching to your offices. My question is that what kind of negotiations or assistance you are giving to restore confidence to the employees in their best interest, and what becomes a plan of government moving forward? Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Piri. The Honorable the Minister.
Chairperson and Honorable Piri, clearly the one assistance that we've attempted to offer is to approach what is called the COVID TERS Fund, or UIF TERS Fund, which provides some relief for employees, and some money was made available a month or two ago by the UIF, but they themselves have a congestion problem, if you like, in terms of the number of applications that the UIF has had to deal with. But we will continue to explore with the UIF what other assistance they can actually offer. And as I said earlier on, we will and want to make sure that the employees don't remain as badly off as they are for too long a period. And once we have some information in this regard about access to further funding, to either retrench all the employees or if the liquidators come up with alternatives, then to work out how we compensate employees for the period during which they haven't been paid. So I absolutely regret the kind of conditions that the employees find themselves, both the pilots and others, and we will try to continue to do our best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the Honorable Meshwebek, Honorable Swart?
House Chief, I may take the follow-up in his place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. You might have covered this to a certain degree, but given the fact that you referred to criminal and civil matters, do you think that the liquidators will have sufficient funding to institute civil matters to claim the amounts of funds that were stolen allegedly during the process, and as referred to by yourself, the corruption in earlier years? Is there any prospect of the liquidators recovering those funds which will then assist the staff? And we share your sentiments regarding the pilots and other staff members that have been placed in this invidious situation. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable the Minister.
Chair and Honourable Swart, I haven't interacted with the liquidators myself, but I will certainly check with the department whether the liquidators have the ways and means to undertake what you've described as criminal and civil proceedings. I think all of us would be absolutely anxious that such proceedings do take place, and that those who have, for example, stolen engines, stolen parts, have allowed suppliers to overcharge SA Express for various services and goods, and some of whom might even be involved with the downfall of SA Express at this point in time, that all of these characters, if I may call them that, receive the kind of attention that they should under normal circumstances. But once we have a greater deal of clarity, Honourable Swart, we can let the public know where we stand on that.
Thank you very much. The next question is question 239, asked by the Honourable Tlomelang to ask the Minister of Small Business and Development. Honourable Minister.
House Chair. Honourable Tlomelang, the dedicated informal and micro business support schemes, such as those for spaza shops and general dealers, mechanics, panel beaters, and fitment centers, which we call the automotive aftermarket support, and also those that are supporting informal and micro agribusinesses, focusing on fruit and vegetable vendors and bakery and butcheries, and those ones that are for open air restaurants, Bomama Kura Morbavijang Strate, and the Chisanyamas and the Kasi Styles takeaway, and those for bakeries and confectionaries, including for those women who bake our bread, and confectionaries where we buy our scones from, and those ones who are making PPEs. They are not one-off interventions. They are supported by a 12 to 24 month support program that helps them to train in terms of business support, business management, financial management, and access to market. It's part of the things that we commit to do to make sure that it's not only about registering them, but for them to run as sustainable and viable businesses. For the motor mechanics, for example, we support them to accredit with the insurance body so that they can service vehicles that are under insurance and be able to claim from insurance companies. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honourable the Minister. Metlomelang, o ka bua mme. Potso e latelang ke ya hao.
Thank you, Chair. Can I continue? Hello, Chair.
What's happening?
Can you hear me, Chair? Hello, Chair. Can I continue?
Yes, yes.
Also,
well,
we're waiting for you.
Okaroka shifta hanyane go na le a lot of background sound mo le mo teng. I can hear you clearly, just that there is a background sound.
All right, thank you, Chair. Can I continue now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Minister, for your prompt response. Honourable Minister, how many informal businesses have been formalized during COVID-19 lockdown? What are the benefits, Honourable Minister, for formalization? Can you please clarify us about the processes? Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Minister.
House Chairperson, we were able to formalize, and we continue to formalize. At least to date, we have formalized 2,242 spaza shops and processing applications from 4,406 spaza shops. We are already processing applications from 31 small-scale and informal bakeries. Some of them are run by cooperatives, and 33 applications from motor mechanics and panel beaters, and also from 15 enterprises that are making clothing and that's why in my earlier response I indicated that we are supporting these small enterprises to formalize and stay with them for the next 24 months, because we want them to have access to build a credit profile and they can run as profitable business. And also we've partnered with the banks to make sure these banks can then create products that are suitable and less costly to the small scale and informal businesses. You will know that as we grew up, our people who were running informal businesses could not access credit as businesses, they always access credit as individual persons. Therefore, the credit standing of an individual affected the viability of their business. So by formalizing them, we allow them or assist them to access credit. But it also assists them to have access to markets that ordinarily they will not be able to. But with the COVID disaster, you would have noticed that we are required to socialize, to do social distancing, to sanitize. It is important for government and the health officials to know where these businesses are located. It's only when they are formalized and registered that we are able to know where they are, and we can do contact tracing in case an incident happens. But it is also good for hygiene, but also to trace where our people are buying things and what are those things that our people are consuming. Because it's only when we know what our people are consuming as government, but also as society, we can be able to prevent diseases and transmissions of unnecessary virus. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will come from the Honorable Hlengwa. Honorable Hlengwa, before ukhuluma, nangisafunda isikolo bekunento ukuthi sibhala abarasayo eklasini. Ngizocela the whips. It's easy to write abarasayo because their names appear on the screens. Ngicela ningincede and kube nento eyenzakalayo kuleyo ndawo, because it's disturbing for these people to keep on coming in on the screens and disturbing as we are doing. Honorable members, please make sure that your mics are muted so that there is a smooth movement in the House and on virtual. Please, otherwise siyababhala abarasayo sababona emva kwesikolo. Siyaqhubeka babuhlengwa qhubeka.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable Minister, during the presentation of your department to the Portfolio Committee on 3 June this year, some 20 days ago, on COVID-19 interventions, key concerns are raised about the fact that sole proprietors face problems complying with requirements for debt relief fund. The department stated it will engage with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to determine if it could make it easier for sole proprietors and informal businesses to register for this debt relief fund. What then, Deputy Minister, steps have been taken since the 3rd of June meeting to make it easier for sole proprietors to register? Linked to this, Minister, is the fact that many young people, after having been encouraged to start businesses, and those that actually did just ahead of this lockdown, and have actually now found themselves in the lurch. What direct interventions for those businesses that at the start of this lockdown were also starting up, what assistance will they get, given the fact that some of the requirements require them to have been about in business for a year? Thank you.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Thank you, Honorable Klengwa. Let me start to clarify that the debt relief was never designed to support informal traders or informal businesses. And therefore, that's why we have separate schemes for the informal businesses. And we communicated that even during that period, that we've got specific schemes for informal businesses. But those informal businesses who applied for the debt relief, because even though you may think the qualification criteria were onerous, some of them indeed apply. We are prioritizing them to move them to the relevant informal business support schemes. Similarly, the sole proprietors, they were allowed to apply for debt relief. The issue that was at debate was whether they should open and not open. And our view was that we need to engage with trade and industry, as not all sole proprietors belong to us. You would have noticed that post that engagement with the regulations of level 3, the sole proprietors were also covered in our regulations to allow them to trade. is, as it relates to the question around what are we going to do with startups, is linked to what we are going to do to assist all small businesses, formal ones in particular, because the informal ones, we've got dedicated support schemes. As we reopen the economy, we are working on finalizing what we call a business viability scheme that will allow this, all businesses that will be viable in terms of the new business models that will be required to be supported and to further their businesses. So we'll deal with the applications at that end. You must remember that we continue to work with our incubators and venture capital partners to make sure that startup businesses are also supported. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister. The next question will come from the Honorable Dana from the FF+. Honorable
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Continue, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, small businesses are plagued by many obstacles such as cash flow problems, government and legislative overregulation, the poor state of the economy, and now also a pandemic. South Africa is facing massive job losses on top of an unemployment rate of 30.1%. In light of this, what is the Minister and her department's stance on overregulation of small businesses through B-BBEE and affirmative action legislation, and for how much longer will the implementation of race-based legislation be prioritized above merit and the well-being of the economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dena. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Den. We need to clarify that B-BBEE and affirmative action policies are not regulation of small businesses. They are a necessary transformatory articles available to government to redress the historic imbalances of what the separate development of apartheid did to marginalize majority of our people. You will recall that there were two court cases that we faced. We faced the case of Solidarity versus the Minister of Small Business Development, which was anchored by the Minister of Tourism. Solidarity lost that case because the courts confirmed that BEE is a necessary requirement for transformation of this country. And even the appeal on that case was lost. Recently, the court came back on the matter of the DA versus the President of the Republic of South Africa, which was anchored by the Minister of Small Business Development, and confirmed that the BEE criteria of race, gender, youth, and disability are necessary. The court ordered the minister to go and change that criteria because the minister had developed a criteria to make it optional or a preference for women, youth, and people with disability to be prioritized. And the court said it can't be a preference, it should be compulsory. And when it's compulsory, you cannot only be vague, you must be specific. So as we are currently reworking the formula as directed by the court to make sure that we are specific to promote race, gender, youth, and disability, because an inclusive economy is going to be built and rise from this disaster of COVID, and we cannot be apologetic, and we are not apologetic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Minister. Umbuzo olandelwayo uzobuzwa ngumhlonishwa onkwankwa.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honorable Minister, if one were to consider the successes of how the Asian tigers and some countries in Southeast Asia have done in trying to stimulate growth of the informal sector and to turn it into the formal sector, I want to understand, would like to know from you whether you have used this process to try and understand firstly the complexity of the sector, which is the informal sector of the economy during this COVID-19 period. If yes, what targeted interventions have you made in order to try and stimulate each sector of the informal sector as a way of trying to stimulate firstly economic growth and as a job creation strategy? Because in many parts of the world, the informal sector, including here in South Africa, employs a lot of people in the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Kwankwa. You are correct that the informal sector, even in the small business sector category, employs the highest number of people even in this country. That's why we have a program that is dedicated and not a generalized program. We have a program that focuses not only building the informal sector, but also building the township and village economies, which the informal sector are predominantly found. So what we have done with this program, I've earlier mentioned that we've got a scheme, for example, that supports panel beaters, motor mechanic, and auto fitment centers. Honorable members will know, those of us who grew up in the disadvantaged communities, of a motor mechanic in a street corner or who works under a tree in some village. And those motor mechanics, it's not that their skill levels are not good. Those motor mechanics were trained at TVET colleges or technical colleges, and some of them have trade certificates, but they do not have access to facilities to make their businesses be recognized or be accredited by insurance companies. So our program to support motor mechanics, we give them training to run the workshop and make sure that if your car is sent to that motor mechanic, you can have an estimation of when will it return, what the guarantee that the parts or components that are going to be fitted in that car have some guarantee or warranty. And also that the facilities that they use, they are accredited by the insurance bodies, because it's only when a facility satisfies the standards of the insurance body that they can be able to claim from the insurance. This will allow the motor mechanics and panel beaters and auto fitment centers to have access to the motor vehicle market, which is almost 13 million in this country, but only 30% is covered by warranty or under motor plan, and the rest remains open, which means the ordinary motor mechanics can participate in that. So we are creating markets for these people. I'm just using that as a singular example. I can also further add, and on the ones who are making PPEs, or the ones who are clothing, textile, and leather. Majority of them, we know them for making the cloth face masks, but they don't only make cloth face masks, they make aprons, oversized shoes for hospital care and all those things. We are helping them to access the markets for healthcare services. That's why the National Treasury amended the Treasury note to make sure that government departments and agencies procure their PPEs from the SMMEs who are accredited in the database of the Department of Small Business Development. We are also working to support the initiative of our president on the Africa Medical Supplies Platform, and we are seeking to accredit these small businesses to make sure that they can supply their PPEs into the African market because they are available. For us, it's also part of creating a market for them. Thank you, honorable members.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister. We now move to question number 235, asked by the Honorable Hermans to the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The Honorable, the Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and my apologies for struggling with the parliamentary screen background. Honourable members, pandemics, like wars, change and reshape societies. They do so in the cost and damage that they impose during the period, but also in the deep changes that are effected as societies reconstruct afterwards. This pandemic has serious and deeply damaging effects on jobs, on growth, and on transformation. And we're not out of the woods yet. On top of the challenges we have been addressing before COVID-19, the pandemic also disrupted supply lines across the world, which closed local car factories even before our lockdown started. It affected our pace of reindustrialization as key programs were slowed down. It dampened global demand for our commodities. It affected business confidence that may discourage investment that would otherwise have taken place, and it knocks vulnerable firms and communities harder than others. The plans we put in place before the pandemic, as recently as February, while appropriate for its time, will no longer be sufficient to address the new circumstances or challenges that are much bigger than before. The President announced a 500 billion rand package of immediate actions in April to support workers, firms, and vulnerable communities. Clearly, honourable members, a scaled-up reconstruction plan will be necessary to address the jobs and growth impact of the pandemic and building on the interventions that are being put in place. To turn to the first part of your question, Honourable Hermans, I want to highlight 5 elements of such a plan. First, infrastructure-led recovery measures that focus on critical economic, social and industrial infrastructure and use that program to build and rebuild local supplier industries. Secondly, a thoughtful import replacement program and more resilient supply lines to avoid the gaps and the disruptions we face with global supply chains, so that we produce the PPEs, the medical equipment, the basic foods, and the other products needed in the country and on our continent. Third, deepening the digitization and greening of the economy, bringing more small players and township enterprises into the new digital platforms and speeding up green economy measures. Fourth, transformation of economic structures to create more economic inclusion and stepping up the pace of transformation with targeted measures for small businesses and black industrialists. And we need to address the issue of worker participation in company boards to truly transform the workplace. Fifth, building the opportunities on the African continent with a greater focus on innovation and industrialization backed by the African Continental Free Trade Area and accompanied by investment in factories and infrastructure on the continent. In the second part of your question, Honourable Hermans, I want to note that the President announced that over the next 5 years, the IDC would scale up its investment into youth and women-empowered enterprises. Since the 1st of April this year, the IDC has approved a total of 358 million rand for funding to women and youth-empowered companies. Of these, 1 transaction involves a youth-empowered business that makes PPE masks, and 7 involve women-empowered businesses, including companies that make PPEs and sanitizers and disinfectants, but also companies making products such as plastic containers for cosmetics, cleaning products, roller towels, facial tissues, serviettes, and napkins.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, the Honourable Minister. Honourable Hermans.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, the lockdown has had negative impact, a very negative impact on the economic activities in our country and across the world. What further support measures and interventions will be put in place to ensure that the full opening of the economy to global trade finds our domestic companies, for example, in the sugar industry, ready to compete internationally?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you for the follow-up question, Honourable Hermans. You correctly point out the challenges we may face with the full resumption of trade and its impact on local industries. Perhaps I should use the example that you've quoted of sugar to illustrate the broader approach that we are taking. Now, the sugar industry, of course, is made up of a large number of small-scale farmers, accounting for a small part of the output and income in the sector, and a much smaller number of large farms. The crisis in that sector, Honourable Hermans, as you would know, predates COVID-19. But there's no question that unless we are able to address the challenges, the worst affected will be small-scale, largely black farmers with limited capital, with limited networks of influence or access to the know-how to shift to other crops and sectors. Before the COVID crisis, we spent time developing the Sugar Master Plan, looking at 2 areas, how to grow the sector and how to transform the sector, because they're 2 parts of the same equation. On the growth side, the economic problematic that the industries had to face is that demand for sugar domestically is shrinking because of the decline in consumption of sugar. We now have less sugar in our beverages, we're more health conscious, but also there's been an expansion in the levels of imported sugar. So we sat down with the key role players, the retailers and the food industries and beverage industries that are big users of sugar. And we have from them an in-principle commitment to localize more, to buy more local sugar, as well as to give us the opportunity for a deeper restructuring of the sector. In fact, just today, we will be gazetting a notice providing a brief summary of the Sugar Master Plan and designating the sugar industry in terms of Section 10 of the Competition Act. And that would allow the industry the opportunity to meet and give effect to the terms of the Sugar Master Plan. So coming back to your broader question, it is working with individual sectors to improve their dynamism, but also to deepen local consumption of South African-made products. It's really on the demand side getting a greater level of localization, and on the supply side improving the dynamism and the overall efficiencies of our sectors as part of a broader transformation of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. The next follow-up question is from the Honorable Macpherson.
Thank you very much. Minister, let me tell you why South Africa uses less sugar. It's because of your sugar tax that your government implemented, in which you refused to withdraw and stop putting on the tax books, which only lead to job losses. But on the 22nd of May, Enoch Godonwana presented an economic reconstruction document which contains some interesting views. When it comes to your plans to reboot and totally restructure the economy, will this include creating more SOEs, including a state pharmaceutical company, a state bank for financing, prescribed assets to prop up Eskom, a 33 billion rand bailout for SAA, and nationalization without compensation? If it does, is this not what the ANC have been advocating already for the last decade, which has got us into this mess in the first place?
The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you very much for the question. Let me start with the sugar tax. Honorable Macpherson would be well advised to get advice from medical professionals on a global trend, something that's not confined to South Africa, in which consumers are becoming more conscious of some of the challenges of high sugar intake. We have followed that global trend in putting in place public policy measures to address this, but at the same time we recognize the speed with which health measures are introduced need to be carefully calibrated with jobs and other key issues. So what we've done on the sugar industry is to say, what is it that are the potential opportunities for the use of sugar or the use of sugar lands, the fields, the farming areas, and so on. And in the master plan, two basic ideas have come out. But the first one is indeed the idea that there are other uses for sugar. And so we're looking at the question of biofuels and bioplastics, among others. And the second area is to see, can we foster and stimulate and encourage greater industrial diversification on sugar farms, such as the planting of nuts, essential oils, and so on. So that represents one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, how do we address the growing increase in the import of sugar? Some of it is from countries like Brazil, where there are trade tools available to us. Others come from our neighbor Eswatini. So it's in dealing with all of these challenges as a whole that we find an appropriate and proper response. And so therefore, I think the jibe is inappropriate and unearned. On the broader question that has been asked by Honorable Macpherson, indeed the question of economic reconstruction is going to be fundamental. It will require a mix of measures. Some of it will be intervention by the public authorities and government. We've seen elsewhere in the world some really interesting examples. Others will be supporting and fostering a greater level of private entrepreneurship and a strong role for the private sector in stimulating jobs and investment, and yet others are, in fact, deepening the level of worker involvement in the economy more broadly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Just a reminder for the subsequent, the first question you have 4 minutes, and the subsequent ones you have 2 minutes, ministers, even those who are still going to respond. The next question comes from Honorable Langa.
Thank you, Chairperson. Our follow-up is on the second part of the main question, of which the Minister only highlighted on his response. And we will request the Minister to rather respond in detail. Can the Minister tell us how many women-owned businesses have been part of your trade mission? And out of those, how many have translated into real opportunities, especially in the manufacturing industry, where there has been no visibility? We would like a list, please. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Langa, and I welcome your question, and I would be very happy to provide a list of such examples, because the efforts of the department and the agencies is focused on greater economic inclusion. When women are supported with trade missions, with efforts to increase the extent of women enterprises in the economy, it's not an act of charity, it's not an act only of social redress, it's fundamental to South Africa's economic future. And so we have the question itself that Honorable Hermans crafted dealt with one element of it, which is industrial funding, the efforts by the IDC in terms of the commitment that was set out in February this year. So certainly to the extent that we as a department have other areas and other instruments, they are also increasingly being utilized to see how we identify opportunities for women-owned enterprises and youth enterprises. I want to go back to the IDC one because it's a really interesting example where some 6 years ago, the IDC was set a target to improve the level of investment in women-owned enterprises. It has exceeded that target, and yet the opportunities to bring more women in the economy is enormous. So on Honorable Langa's question for a list, I'm sure we can provide that list of efforts that have been made, and I would welcome the opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Akhbaralat Mulder. This is a date.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair. My follow-up question to the Honourable Minister is on the first part of his question, on the reopening or rebooting of the South African economy. And the question is, do the Minister admit that state capture and corruption contributed immensely towards the downgrading of South Africa as an investment destination by the world's biggest credit rating agencies, with a detrimental effect on trade and industry, leaving the South African economy vulnerable when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, thus imposing an even bigger challenge on the reopening of the economy and trade? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mulder. There's no question about it that state capture and the cost of corruption weakened our economy, and there is no question also that it had a negative impact on GDP and on jobs. In fact, Honourable Mulder, you'd be interested to know that we ran an initial exercise in the year 2017 looking at the impact of state capture and corruption on economic performance. So that, I think, is absolutely one element. But it's not the only issue that we need to deal with. We found, for example, that a big constraint to deeper and more sustainable economic growth is high levels of economic concentration in South Africa, where in fact dominant players effectively are able to keep small players out of the market. We found that lack of sufficient investment in infrastructure resulted in bottlenecks that constrained the levels of growth. And of course, critically for us, the small size of the South African market with fewer than 60 million people meant that we needed to look north, look to our own continent, and ensure that we take the kind of steps to integrate economies on the African continent so that we create scale and size. So there's a range of factors that contribute to lower growth. And of course, with the COVID pandemic, as I've indicated in my reply, they will aggravate some of these, but there's also an opportunity now to think in a different way, to take some of the constraints that has limited policy making and partnership and address them. And in fact, as I indicated, very often pandemics and wars does open up space, and people do think in new ways. So I have no doubt that out of the measures we take going forward, there will be enormous opportunities for South Africa, industrial opportunities, but there are also huge costs that we will have to bear from the period we've gone through. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last supplementary question. We now move to question 244, asked by the Honorable Minam to the Minister of Public Enterprise. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Van Menen, Eskom has achieved most of the 2019-2020 objectives for divisionalization as set out in the roadmap for Eskom in a reformed electricity supply industry paper, which was issued in October 2019. Target dates for the balance of the milestones envisaged in the roadmap have been refined given the complexities associated with these changes. The high-level achievements to date were highlighted to Parliament as follows. The functional leader operating model has been adopted as the basis for how Eskom will manage its business. This allows the various businesses to function independently. Business models for the divisions and corporate functions for the first phase of divisionalization are at an advanced stage of completion. A total of 8,890 employees have been linked to the operating divisions, of whom 6,500 are from head office functions. The volume of staff linked enables the line divisions to function separately. Any further relatively fewer changes in future will be to align with business and operating models once they have been completed. Divisional managing directors have been appointed, divisional boards have been appointed, divisional board members for all three Eskom divisional boards have been already been meeting. Cash flow statements and income statements are in place for the divisions. We have achieved the first step in the creation of the market operator and central purchasing agency by contracting between generation, transmission, and distribution. Internal trading between the divisions is in place. This was done by setting up a trading simulation, internal transfer pricing, and the balancing mechanism. Agreements between divisions have been concluded. This formally enables trading and new behavior around forecasting and availability, which is improving and allowing for better balancing and predictive loads due to penalties and benefits that arise from these daily trades. Despite this being a virtual trading space initially, lessons are being learned about what rules would need to be refined and what risks would arise in various scenarios. This approach is bearing fruit in also managing possible risks and highlighting skills needed and informing more effective operations once the unbundling occurs. As far as the legal separation is concerned, this will depend upon regulatory and policy changes in the electricity industry and could possibly happen late in 2021. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable Minam.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honourable Minister, in an interview yesterday, the CEO of Eskom confirmed that in future there will be less coal-fired generation capacity and that Eskom needs to structure itself in a way to attract private investment to compete, particularly with regards to energy generation, and that this investment and competition is in line with the new era of generation, including renewables. Does the Minister agree that this emphasis towards private investment and increased competition heralds the future approach towards Eskom, and in particular energy generation, and will he be looking to ensure that the unbundling will be focused on allowing this freeing up of the market? I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable the Minister.
Chair, I certainly would agree with the CEO that over the next 20 to 30 years, less coal will be used, and this is predicted very accurately or appropriately in the Integrated Resource Plan, which sees coal usage declining over the next few decades and an increasing use of non-coal power generation, including nuclear, gas, and of course renewables as well. Secondly, let me point out that already within the generation scenario in South Africa, you have mixed generation already, that generated by Eskom on the one hand, and by various private sector entities, whether it's renewables or self-generation in mines, and the Minister of Energy has issued several licenses and will continue to do so in that particular regard. Thirdly, in relation to competition within the generation sector, we've already had Eskom cluster the power stations into 3 clusters, and in the near future, all of those clusters will have to compete on the basis of price and efficiency with each other, let alone competition between themselves as Eskom's own generation plants and the private sector generation as well. So there's no doubt that as we traverse the next decade or so, there will be formidable changes taking place on the generation side of this business.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next follow-up question will come from Honorable Mkwanazi as I allow the Deputy Speaker to come in. Honorable Mkwanazi, Deputy Speaker, you will come in after the Honorable Mkwanazi. Honorable Mkwanazi.
Thank you.
Let me take it.
Thank you, House Chair. Minister, we appreciate and acknowledge the work that has been done and the progress done by the department under your leadership. The question will be, will the restructuring of Eskom assist in terms of ensuring better supplying the market with electricity, and how will IPPs be accommodated in the new structure which does not negatively affect Eskom supply? Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Mkwanazi. There's no doubt that as we complete the restructuring process and begin to develop a new business model within Eskom and for Eskom, and as changes take place in the wider electricity market itself, that supply of electricity will become more consistent and more predictable and more reliable over time, because that is what a growing economy requires in terms of certainty in regard to the security of supply. The IPPs or independent power producers, whether it is coal-powered, gas-powered, or using renewable energy, will be a permanent part of what we see into the future. And lots of lessons have been learned over the last few years about the manner in which contracts are drafted, the manner in which the pay-or-take principle is actually applied, and the consistency with which power from these sources can be relied upon as well. So we are in a fascinating period of transition, if you like, from a past which was reliant totally on coal and generated by Eskom, to a potential future, as I pointed out earlier on, where there will be mixed generation of energy, both in terms of sources of energy, but also the producers of energy as well. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, are you on the platform? Okay, we continue for now as we trace the Deputy Speaker. The Honorable Vessels.
Is here, Madam,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
After Honorable Vessels, you will continue to Honorable Komani. Yes, Honorable Vessels. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. You'll take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. To the Minister, how does the unbundling of Eskom address its debt burden? Each separate entity will have its own CEO, its own board, and its own top management at exorbitant salary levels. How will this address the financial woes of Eskom and the fundamental causes such as the outstanding debt of municipalities? I thank
you. Minister?
Deputy Speaker, it's a very good question. I think at the end of the day, taking Eskom out of the woes of its past and the period of state capture and corruption that it underwent over the last few years does mean that on the one hand, we've got to get a new board, get a new management team, and get greater efficiencies in which Eskom operates. And as the President pointed out in several SONA speeches, Eskom will require a change in its business model. It'll have to become more consistent with the kind of models that have been introduced elsewhere in the world, where the integrated vertical model is no longer regarded as the most efficient way and the most competitive way in which to generate and transmit and sell electricity at the end of the day. And furthermore, as the President pointed out, Eskom will not be able to trade its way out. And as a too big a risk or too big a problem to fail, the state has come to the assistance of Eskom in relation to alleviating a part of the debt burden. But there are currently ways in which different formulae are being looked at, and we'll make some announcements in due course to relieve the debt burden. But the path of unbundling or separating the different entities and moving into a future of a very differently structured Eskom and one Eskom holding company is a path that we cannot fail in. As far as the municipal debt is concerned, that's a very minor part, where the total debt is around 450 billion rands. Municipalities owe somewhere around 30 billion rands at the moment. Some of that debt is structural in the sense that poor municipalities aren't able to generate the right level of income, or in other regards, there's a bit of laxity that needs to change at the local government level in terms of revenue collection and changing the culture of payment as well. So there is a determined effort in the task team that the Deputy President chairs on Eskom to ensure that all South Africans pay for that electricity that they can afford to pay for. And that would be the goal that we would work towards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Brotto, I don't have the list before me here. Could you please handle the next supplementary person's name?
Honorable Komani from the EFF.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The Minister, are there any assets that belong to
I noticed the sound is very bad here.
During this process of unbundling.
Can you try again differently, ma'am? We can't
Thank you very much, Minister. I repeat the question. Are there any assets?
Honorable Deputy Speaker, it's Honorable Hlangweni. I can assist with the question because it seems Honorable Komani struggled with network.
Okay, go ahead, please. Do that.
If I may
yes.
again, any assets that belongs
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Minister, the question are there any assets that belongs to Eskom and the public that are going to be privatized during the process of unbundling Eskom? If yes, can we have a list of the assets, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for assisting. None of the major assets of Eskom, a power station or whatever the case might be, or a transmission line, is intended for privatization at all. However, Eskom over the years has accumulated functions and entities that it does not actually require. And one such example is the Eskom Finance Corporation. And that provides home loans and other facilities to Eskom staff, which is not the core function of Eskom itself. So at an appropriate point in time, that will be put on the market for sale, if you can call it that, or to establish whether there are interested parties in such a venture, so that the kind of skills that would be available in the private sector can be utilized for that purpose. But the income derived from such a proposition would in fact be used to relieve some of the debt that Eskom has, which I referred to earlier on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question. Are we done the supplementary questions?
We are done, Deputy Speaker. I have requested that they send you the supplementary question list. I think you have it in your possession now. The next question, Honorable Deputy Speaker, is 214. You can take it from there, 214.
Okay, thank you.
May I proceed, Deputy Speaker?
Please go ahead, Minister.
Honourable Martwe, the matter of the investigation into a senior official of Eskom has now been completed, and appropriate legal advice has been obtained, as I suggested I would, or Eskom would, in the Standing Committee on Public Accounts meeting last week. The report will be released to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts during the course of this week. Legal advice has also been obtained in respect of a recommended disciplinary inquiry, and the advice is as follows, and I quote, "It would be inappropriate to conduct any disciplinary hearing at this stage, bearing in mind that the dispute has already been heard in the High Court and judgment is pending. This would have an impact on the contemplated disciplinary process. It would be prudent, reasonable, and fair to all concerned to await the findings of the court. Otherwise, valuable resources would be employed in the circumstances where the very issue has been ventilated in court." End of quotation. Any suggestion of victimization, may I point out, will also be thoroughly investigated. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. I'm just following up on here. The next supplementary question is by the honourable member who asked the question.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Minister, you'll recall that I've raised quite a number of times the issue of the corruption case that is pending, that is sitting on the head of the COO. And the reason why I asked for the witnesses is because one of the witnesses who testified and even sent a representation to the Zonal Commission was Mr. Mark Chetia, who refused to take a baseless and illegal instruction to pay Avenge the amount of 42 million, and is currently fighting for his life in hospital. Now, the question is, what are you doing about victimization that is currently at Eskom? Because since then, Mr. Mark has suffered unimaginable victimization at the hands of the COO, one. Two, if you keep on protecting these witnesses and refusing to give us the report, you are actually agreeing to yourself when you said last week in the SCOPA that not every corruption is necessarily a criminal case. So can you give us an example of a corruption that is not a criminal case? I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Minister.
Well, I don't know, Deputy Speaker. I thought I answered all of the questions that the Honorable Moatwe is asking. So the aggression that I experience here is rather unwarranted. So let me repeat what I said earlier on. The report will be released to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts during the course of this week. Legal advice has also been obtained in respect of a recommended disciplinary inquiry. The advice is as follows, and I quote, "It would be inappropriate to conduct any disciplinary hearing at this stage, bearing in mind that the dispute has already been heard in the High Court and judgment is pending. This would have an impact on the contemplated disciplinary process. It would be prudent, reasonable, and fair to all concerned to await the findings of the court. Otherwise, valuable resources would be employed in circumstances where the very issue has been ventilated in court." End of quotation. And on the question of victimization, I've just received a letter or inquiry from Honorable Moatwe, and we will certainly make sure that this matter is thoroughly investigated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
The Minister did not respond to my last question of examples of corruption that is not a criminal case.
Honorable Member.
Yes.
Honorable Member. Honorable Member.
Question.
Honorable Member, please, let's proceed to the next one.
Deputy Speaker, my question is not answered. Can I be answered?
Honorable Member.
May I
The Minister says he wants to respond.
Honorable Minister.
Yes.
Honorable Minister, sorry.
Yeah. No, all I was saying is that there are cases of alleged corruption that might turn into a minor disciplinary offense for which you get fined or suspended for a period of time and which don't end up in a criminal court. There are other examples when you steal from a bank or similar things where you do end up in court. And there are examples of that in the public domain. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Next, the next one is asked by Honorable Sengwa.
Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair.
Yes.
Speaker, I think you may be reading the wrong list. We were not allocated that question.
Okay.
Yeah, if the House...
What's the next one day? Sorry.
Yeah, stay ready for the next one. But I can take it if you want to give me. Oh, okay. I'm always
No, let's follow the order there, Honorable. Yes,
Honorable Deputy Speaker, the next follow-up question is going to come from Honorable Kachalia. Do you have that one? We are on 214.
214. Let me just confirm that. It's
Kachalia.
Sorry, my apologies. I just want to question
number 5.
Yes, go ahead, Honorable Kachalia.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. That corruption appears to be endemic at SOEs is clearly common cause. The question is, given an Eskom board minute that was comprehensively ignored to only enter into turnkey contracts, the company instead entered into and still continues with EPCM, that is Engineering, Procurement, Construction, Management contracts that allows contractors to be appointed by Eskom and managed by Eskom, who then assumes all liabilities, and we know the quantum of these liabilities. Is that not the real reason why corruption flourishes and continues to do so? A problem which should have been obviated if the board minute was adhered to as it should have been, Perhaps the Minister will elucidate about this flouting and subsequent silence of a crucial board minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister.
Well, Deputy Speaker, I don't necessarily receive minutes of board meetings. So I take Honourable Kachalia's point that there are more safe ways, if you like, of conducting big projects that Eskom has been involved in. And as he correctly points out, it's common cause that over the years there has been rampant corruption, and that many who have been involved in such corrupt activities, where even family members have received 1 billion rands of contracts, should find themselves in jail rather than being sitting at home or whatever else that they're doing. So I think he would agree with me that that's the kind of direction and action we require to discourage any further corruption within SOEs generally, but Eskom in particular. On the particular minute that he talks about, I'm not aware of it, but I will certainly inquire about it, and if he's interested, he can certainly contact my office and we can provide him the relevant clarity that's required. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable Swart, you are the third supplementary question.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Arising from your response, Honourable Minister, as you're aware, you served with us for a time on the oversight inquiry of Parliament, and a lot of the evidence that was given there of corruption was also ventilated by the Zondo Commission. And we've seen a degree of success in recovering funds, such as the 1 billion rand from McKinsey Management Consultants and the trillion issue of 600 million. But Eskom has indicated it's looking to recover 6.9 billion, and in March indicated that 5 international companies are being investigated for repeatedly modifying contracts. Can you, Honourable Minister, give us an indication as to the progress of these and other matters where funds are sought that were misappropriated are being sought to be recovered? And we agree entirely with you that those people should be sitting in jail. And lastly, whether you're aware of allegations of inflated prices now relating to coal contracts that could further impact Eskom going forward. I thank you.
Thank you.
You must mute your mic.
Honourable Minister.
Deputy Speaker, you'll understand that many of these questions from Honourable Swart are not related to the principal question. But he is absolutely right that during 2017, I had the privilege of being part of the Public Enterprises Portfolio Committee, which conducted very close investigation into the shenanigans going on at Eskom, which resulted in a report that was presented to Parliament on the one hand, and acted as a basis for reports to the Zondo Commission as well. He's also right that whether there are local firms involved or foreign firms involved, and there have been many significant repute who have been involved. There's ABB that was involved in one of the contracts. There's, I think, SAP has been involved in some regard as well. You've mentioned McKinsey, and then, of course, firms like Trillion, whose directors and so on, I think, still need a visit from the Hawks so that they can be, apart from covering money, face the charges that they should face as well. But I don't have immediate information on the progress being made in relation to the international firms, but let it be noted that international firms have been an integral part of some of the corrupt activities that have taken place in Eskom. On the question of inflated prices, I imagine that that practice is happening in all sections of government. And the one appeal that one can make, which Parliament should join us in, is that business in South Africa must stop these sorts of practices. Inflating prices means a heavier burden on the fiscus, less money for the key purposes on which fiscal money must be actually spent on, and it's a bad business culture and set of ethics that leads to this kind of behavior. And a revolution is required in South Africa in terms of the morality with which businesses, or some of the businesses, tend to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear Honorable Kwankwa. Is the last supplementary question on this?
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity. Honorable Minister, you are aware that there were allegations. In fact, as the Standing Committee on Appropriations, when we went on oversight in October last year to Eskom, we were told that the certain contractors were overpaid by 4 billion rands in the construction of Kusile Power Station. This story has been going on in the media, but it seems as if now the Eskom management are denying that there ever was such a transaction. I want to hear from you whether you are aware that there was suppliers were overpaid to the tune of 4 billion rands. If yes, whether an investigation has been done to consider as to who was responsible for that, which suppliers are those, and whether there are any consequences in the event that such an overpayment was done. Has there been any investigation of that kind? If no, why not? Thank you.
Minister?
Deputy Speaker, Honorable Kwankwa, I've certainly heard of several amounts, about a 5 billion rands that was paid into Tegeta, which is under business rescue, and it's doubtful whether all 5 billion, according to the CEO, will be recovered. There's an amount which is in dispute with a construction company, which is directly connected to the issue of the COO, and that matter is the matter that I responded to earlier on, and that disciplinary inquiry will take place once the court judgment is available. In relation to the 4 billion rands, there seems to be a fair amount of confusion at the moment. I've asked for clarity on that, and I'm afraid I don't have that clarity at hand. So once I have it, Honorable Kwankwa, we can see whether we could provide you with that clarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next question, 235, has been asked by Honorable J. Hermans to the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. I've been informed that the Minister will be answering questions through the virtual platform like me.
Deputy Speaker, order. We are on 229. 229 to the Minister of Tourism.
Okay. Oh, the list before me is something completely different. Okay. Okay.
I believe it's
Please
on
call
your
the
visual
next,
screen.
yeah.
The Honorable Minister of Tourism, asked by the Honorable Gomba. That's question number 229.
Yeah, I know.
Should I proceed, Deputy Speaker?
Yes, please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Honorable Komba, for the question. In line with the annual performance plan for the 2019-2020 financial year, the Department of Tourism developed a digitalization framework for the tourism sector in South Africa. The framework will provide a blueprint for digitalization and modernization within the tourism sector, while also informing the implementation of digital platforms towards inclusive growth and transformation. In addition, the framework will also provide a systematic approach for analyzing the state of the tourism sector, particularly SMMEs in the rural areas, in regards to the implementation of the fourth industrial revolution technologies. In order to deliver a digitally driven market access program, South African tourism is in the process of developing externally focused tech and data hub. The data hub and the tech will deliver a digital platform or portal that is aimed at enabling SMMEs to register in order to upload their product offering details. The portal will incorporate a consumer-facing booking tool, which will allow for SMMEs to sell directly to the market, while the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has the primary responsibility for the development and promotion of the arts and craft of South Africa. South African tourism digital marketing channels could be part of the sharp end of their marketing drives. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Gomba.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honorable Minister, my question is, with regards to the fourth industrial revolution technologies, is the department going to provide capacity building for the previously disadvantaged SMMEs on the use of the new software for marketing purposes? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we'll collaborate with various partners in terms of the sector. We continue to provide, for example, currently we're running incubation programs, so we'll expand that for the digital platforms, because what we believe is that these platforms will be critical for SMMEs. This is where they will be able to sell their products, and especially because if you look at rural areas and small towns or township products, such as B&Bs or tour operators in those communities, are not able to utilize the currently available digital platforms because of cost. Because when you register on those platforms, for example, you are either expected to pay about 30% of what is being used or what is being booked. And most of them find this unaffordable and inaccessible. So through the platform that the department will be doing, we'll be able to provide an affordable platform, but also make sure that all those we intend for them to use it, we give them the necessary tools and assist them to be able to use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second supplementary question is asked by Honorable Numalo, who's in the chamber there.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Minister, we do note that there are interventions, but I just want you to coin it down to saying if there is a digital strategy in the pipeline for the affected contributors to the tourism sector. Is the department aware that many of them may not have the knowledge and the tools to participate in the upcoming strategy, as you correctly put it? In light of this, is the department willing to collaborate with the Department of maybe communications, for example, in equipping these creators and producers with access to the interfaces that will distribute their products? What other support will the department offer to these distributors? Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Honorable Ngumalo. There are various channels that one can use in terms of ensuring that people are aware. One would be easier. For example, today we do 2 minutes video, which is circulated easily either on WhatsApp and all that. That becomes a training tool. So you don't have to go conventional ways when you want your message to be reached, because we do know that, for example, you can go out and communicate with people using conventional methods, either through mainstream media. You find that majority of people don't use that. But if you go, for example, on social media platforms with a 2 minutes video, today, if you are to find people who something happens, the fastness and the speed of that video, being able to distribute across the country, those are the unconventional ways of doing things. In terms of videos, that can go step by steps to say, this is how you can use it. Because that, in terms of that, you can be able to say, even tomorrow when a person has gone through it, when they want to refresh, then they are able to go that. So yes, we can partner with various departments that are utilizing, are communicating, but we do feel that from the side of the department, including with SAT and our campaigns of domestic tourism, we will be able to reach a number of our sector through the partnership we have with private sector, but also the platforms that we have. We do webinars regularly to be able to reach out. I mean, we've been talking to many of them. Those who do not know, that's what I'm saying. When we had, for example, Women in Tourism meeting, we also agreed to do such 2 minutes video that we can send to WhatsApp. Many of them have WhatsApp conversation that you are able to get in. So there are various mechanisms that can distribute and spread the information more faster, more easier, and more cheaper. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Unmute yourself.
Honorable Mutika.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My question to the Minister is, Minister, people in the remote rural areas, in the villages and in townships do not have data, and they do not have internet connections to sell online. What is the department doing to assist with that? Did you arrange with service providers to assist with the internet signal? If yes, what is to be done, where and when? If not, why? Thank you.
Should I proceed, Deputy Speaker?
Proceed, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Honorable Muteka, you'd remember that the issue of broadband and internet connectivity in the country remains the responsibility of the Department of Communication. I think that's the first thing. But from our side, and looking at their plans in terms of broadband rollout, we do believe that there is an opportunity for us to partner as they roll out broadband across the country, as they're looking, especially with their policy of releasing spectrum. It gives us an opportunity for us to be able to say, we can partner with them as they do that, so that we can create these platforms. Firstly, yes, in terms of issues around access to internet, that's why we're talking about digital hubs. Because if you create hubs, people, even if they do not have the internet access where they stay, then they're able to move to a hub to be able to access that information. They're able to move and locate and load on the platform so that they can have access. So we're looking at that, being realistic about our situation, but ensuring that we drive inclusivity. And the reason specifically was if we were not conscious when we did this, conscious about the impact, especially on rural areas and remote areas, would not have even thought about the platform, because those who are in urban areas already, currently, we believe that they have access to internet, they can sell their product easily and all that. And this specifically is to respond to the challenge of those who are remaining in the marginal parts of our country, having good products, such as either it's attractions, private attractions, such as B&Bs or lodges or game farms, that they are not able to sell because they do not have the way of doing it. So that's why we are saying hubs will help, but also looking at the plans that Department of Communication have will link very well with what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Minister. The last follow-up question will come from Honorable Groenewald.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, to the Minister, except for the digital strategy that is being implemented or developed, is there any other initiative or programs being formulated or implemented that will assist in getting the tourism market, that was once the market that employed a vast number of employees, back to where the market was? The fact that it was the market hardest hit by COVID-19 pandemic regulations. And if so, is there any time frames in this regard, and will the Minister provide us with a report of that? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Groenewald. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Thank you, Honorable Groenewald. Yes, indeed, there are a number of programs that we are working on as the department. What you're talking about, for example, will fall specifically in our work in terms of tourism recovery strategy, where we are looking at, for example, that we need to ensure that when the borders are open, when the skies are open, we are able to have, firstly, the products ready, because we should not assume that when something existed prior to COVID, it will exist. We are seeing quite a number of our sector going down, and therefore one of the things is in the strategies to say, how do we ensure that the products are still available? That's why you have the issues around relief funds to support the work in terms of getting through the risk-adjusted strategy to open the sector so that some of the sectors can start operating and we are able to save them. So that's the first thing in terms of that. But secondly, one of the programs that we run through SAT is around marketing. Marketing of the country remains the major key, and exposing global tourists to what we have as South Africa, our uniqueness of the product that we have, including the people that we have, so that all those that are globally can be able to be attracted to South Africa and continue to visit our country post-COVID. So the issue for us is mainly around the products that we have, the marketing that we put together specifically, because one of the things I must say that beyond just the recovery strategy, which we have shared with the portfolio committee, the work in progress, sorry, we have not shared, we are going to share with the portfolio committee the work in progress, but we'll also share with members of parliament broadly what we are doing with the tourism recovery strategy. But the work that we started prior to COVID in terms of targeted marketing, going into a market, for example, if you are to go to US, if you are go to China, if you are going to go into India, you dissect the market, understand that particular market, who are the people who are likely to travel, what is their interest, and then your marketing and your campaigns specifically target those people so that you can be able to bring them into the country. For example, in India, when we were in India, we learned that more around the issues of conferences, which is falling under MICE, it's a big thing. The issue of destination weddings, for example, in Nigeria is a big thing. So you dissect your market in terms of marketing to be able to attract when you go and market in those areas so that you can be able to bring them and say, these are products that I have that are speaking to your need. So in order for us to be able to do that, that's the work that we are doing to market in those countries, to market in terms of those destination and market, our source market. So it's important that we note that recovery is not happening in isolation to the foundation that we've laid. We'll continue on the foundation that we've laid, and the recovery becomes part of what we boost on, acknowledging the impact of COVID-19 to our tourism sector, both in the country and globally. Thank you, Madam House Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, are you struggling? Can we continue? Thank you. We will continue. The next question comes from the Honorable Ngumalo. It's question number 226, asked to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. The Honorable, the Minister. The Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure.
Sorry, Honourable Chairperson, I just had to unmute myself. Thank you to the Honourable Member from the IFP, Khumalo. My answer is as follows. I did not decide to shut down the IDT, the Independent Development Trust. Since I took office in June 2020, I've engaged together with the Deputy Minister and the DG with IDT, and the Deputy Minister was delegated the responsibility to engage with all DPWI entities. On the 17th of February 2020, IDT Board Chairperson, Mr. Motsoaledi, wrote to me and he recommended that the Minister consider the following two options. That one, IDT must be recapitalized, restructured, turnaround plan as a matter of urgency. The second option, he said, was the initiation of the process of dissolving the trust in terms of clause 19.1 of the trust deeds, which provides that a trust may be dissolved at any time by unanimous resolution of all trustees. Aye.
Order, Honourable Paulson. Continue, the Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Now, I was just saying that the trust may be dissolved at any time by unanimous resolution of all trustees. Then in office, we currently just have one trustee in office. that such resolution shall not be a force and effect unless and until the written consent of the executive authority and the president shall have been obtained. We considered the option of dissolving the IDT for the following reasons. That for the past, since 2012, the government bailed out IDT by 550 million rand. IDT's revenue has declined from 401 million to 207 million by 48%. The net profit has declined over the past 5 years by 143%. And currently, there are 49 projects valued at 326 million rand under litigation. And there's a further liability of the IDT of 26 billion rand. So I've considered these facts that can inform a cabinet memorandum that I must take to cabinet for consideration. So on the 20th of April, I appointed a task team consisting of specialized managers from the Presidential Infrastructure Committee and also the acting CEO of IDT. And the terms of reference for this task team was to go and look at an exit strategy plan as proposed by IDT's chairperson, Mr. Motsoaledi, and they need to address the operational, financial, technical, legal program, and labor-related issues. So the first draft report has been presented to the Deputy Minister and myself. We are busy working with the task team so that we can distill the relevant information for the cabinet memorandum for cabinet to consider the proposal to dissolve IDT. Question 2, the Director General Advocate Sam Vukela has been involved in this process from the beginning. All submissions, all correspondence from the department and the IDT goes through the office of the Director General. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister. Babu Ngumar, Rakela Phambili, Khonishwa.
Ngiyathokoza Sihlalo. Honorable Minister, on the 17th of June, last week, Wednesday, you will recall that members of the Portfolio Committee, including myself, spoke very strongly about not bringing members of the committee on board when such decisions are being taken. Parliament was also briefed on that particular day by the Department of Public Works on IDT exit strategy. The presentation itself made no mention of the action that would be taken in relation to the apparent 11 million rand that was billed by the IDT during the time of lockdown for management fees in terms of the EPWP, which was supposed to be done by NPOs under IDT. It, however, appears that the majority of the work was undertaken by the department itself. What actions had been taken to justify this, and why has there been a delay if there is one? Thank you, Honorable Chair and Minister.
Thank you, the Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for that question. I must re-emphasize that no final decisions has been taken. In terms of the trust deed, there is a dissolution structure. And as the Minister, the Executive Authority, I have to take a Cabinet memorandum for consideration by Cabinet and also the President. In terms of the work of the NPO sector, yes, during the COVID-19, we were requested by the Minister of Health to recruit 25,000 EPWP workers that can assist in the fight against COVID-19 for screening purposes and COVID-19 purposes. Because we are already in the first quarter of the new financial year, and the budget for the NPO sector was with IDT, and IDT had not been fully and officially dissolved, we then asked IDT to help us to recruit the 25,000 workers for COVID-19 purposes, which they did. The IDT charged the department 11 million rand to do that task, and that is why we had asked IDT to assist us, because the money for the NPO sector had already been transferred to IDT for this current financial year. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next follow-up question will come from the Reverend Mishwe. Are you there, Muruti?
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The decision to shut down the Independent Development Trust was mainly due to poor management and performance. The Auditor General raised concerns about corruption taking place in the IDT in the 2018-19 annual report, and a forensic investigation report by PricewaterhouseCoopers on the fraudulent contract management recommended that at least 4 individuals in the department should be charged for various transgressions, yet it seems that not much has been done about it. It is scandalous to know that even the DG himself has been implicated in the awarding of fraudulent contracts to state funerals. So what I want to know from the minister is, when is she going to act on the recommendations by taking disciplinary action against implicated officials, while we are waiting for the president to deal with Director General Vukela, who also has been implicated in fraudulent contracts for state funerals. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mishwe. The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Meshu, you have it wrong. This has got nothing to do with the Independent Development Trust. The references that you make about poor performance is also not, as far as I know, related to the funerals issue. And if the member wants to ask a separate question about the funeral allegations that is already being discussed by Scoper, but he has got it wrong. This is not related, Chairperson, to the IDT. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Graham. Meg Graham.
It's Honorable Hicklet, Deputy Chair.
No problem, continue.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chair. Minister DeLille, since your appointment as the Minister of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure in May 2019, cracks within the department have become very apparent. This became abundantly clear with the shelving of the Public Works Academy, which appeared to be the beacon of hope for Director General Sam Vukela and his team. In addition, the DG committed himself and the department to the restructuring of the IDT. Behind the scenes, however, you were holding bilateral meetings with the IDT board to negotiate its closure. Given that you have admitted to discussing this with the DG, why do you make public pronouncements that contradict him in the media? Thank you.
The Honorable the Minister.
I think, with due respect, Honorable Member, you don't have your facts correct. First of all, the restructuring, and if you look at the records of Parliament of the past 5 years, your Honorable Member of Parliament, Patricia Kopani, reminded the committee last week about all of the reports that came to Parliament in the 5th administration and all the concerns raised by Parliament at the time. It's true that the Auditor General raised concerns about the annual report. That was before my time. And I don't think, Honourable Member, you must underestimate that we cannot just simply ignore that government has bailed out IDT of over 550 million rand. There is a liability of 364 million rand for litigation. So allow us to investigate all of these things. Let us make sure that we also align to government's directive that we need to look at all non-performing state-owned entities. If there is any member of the portfolio committee, like I've called on you last week, that if you want to go to government or to treasury and ask for another bailout of IDT, you are free to do so. But you've got your facts mixed completely, honourable member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last follow-up question will come from Honourable Mashele. Honourable Mashele.
I'll take it, Honourable Chairperson.
Okay, Honourable Minister, my apologies. It's taken by Honourable Seabi.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
No. Honourable Member, we are on question 226, asked to the Minister of Public Works Infrastructure. In my list, I have Honourable Mashele, but I've been informed Honourable Seabi will take it. Honourable Seabi.
Thanks very much, House Chair, and thanks very much to the Minister. Minister, in your answer, you seemingly preferred the option of dissolving IDT. My question is, what is the process being followed to finally dissolve IDT, and what will happen to the mandate and functions that are currently being performed by IDT? Thanks.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The final decision to dissolve the IDT is in terms of its own trust deed. The Minister, as the executive authority, must prepare a report to go to Cabinet for consideration by Cabinet and the President. It is only thereafter, once the Cabinet has considered the dissolution of IDT and has weighed up all the facts and the liabilities of IDT, that we will then make a final decision how to take it forward. That the reason why I agreed with the chairperson of IDT and I've accepted the option of dissolvement is because of the current state of the organization. I mean, the organization is currently insolvent. Since last year, December, we had to ask permission from National Treasury just to provide operational cost payment of salaries to IDT. And we had spent in January of this year another 10 million. And the portfolio committee is aware about the problems within IDT itself. So this process is subject to a number of steps. Once, for instance, Cabinet agreed that we must dissolve IDT, then we have to go to the Master of the High Court. And we have to, if there are creditors that are currently suing IDT for unpaid bills, they also have the option of going and file for liquidation. So this whole process is not final yet. It's still subject to Cabinet approval. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. We move to question 242, as I allow the Honourable Ntombela to ready himself to continue. The question is question 242, asked by the Honourable Van Standen to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. The Honourable Minister, Honourable Ntombela, you
Honourable
take over.
the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. The Honorable Minister.
Who's speaking now? Who's speaking?
Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure.
What's happening? Okay, I'm sorry, the Minister, there is an echo here. Can we allow the Minister to answer question 242 asked by Honorable Van Staden? Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. In terms of the Department of Health guidelines for quarantine and isolation sites concerning COVID-19 exposure and infection, Section 4.1 clearly outlines the composition of the facility assessment team. The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure does not have a role insofar as inspection of private-owned facilities is concerned. Department of Public Works is responsible for the supply chain procurement processes for activation of compliant quarantine sites that's listed on the master database. National Treasury, the Department of Tourism, the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, and the industry represented by the Federated Hospitality Association, FEDASA. They have negotiated the rates paid by government, and the rates were approved by National Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Ntombela. Honorable Ntombela, are you there?
Yeah, well, Honorable Chair.
Thank you.
I am here, Honorable Chair.
I'll call Honorable Van Staden, and you will continue as a follow-up question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, we see in this past COVID-19 term we are currently in now, but there were a lot of problems regarding the quarantine facilities in South Africa. And that's why I asked this question to the Honorable Minister. In the previous committee meeting we had of Public Works and Infrastructure, the problem of Zitebeseni came onto the agenda and it was discussed there. And we asked the Honorable Minister there to just supply us with a list of these quarantine facilities so that members of Parliament can go and do their oversight role regarding these facilities. And as I understand, there was this list was said to be rolled out to the honourable members of this portfolio committee, which we are still waiting on. My question, however, is we see that there's still a lot of problems, new problems surfacing coming from underneath. The latest one is the repatriates, which was repatriated from Mozambique last weekend, arrived at the hotel in Nelspruit. And then they were told that the husband, the wife, and the two little babies must all four sign for a room. They were actually not told, they were told to do that and not ask. So the question is now, the Honourable Minister last time came to the Portfolio Committee to tell that the amount of 28 million rand was paid to privately owned facilities regarding the quarantine sites. The question is now, is she willing from her side to launch an independent investigation regarding these problems we're having currently at these quarantine sites? Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Chairperson, like I explained the procedure here, in terms of the regulations, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure must identify sites and make them available. Once we've identified sites, and we've identified over 3,000 sites by now, of which 630 is owned by the state, then the Department of Health will go and assess and inspect those centers. And once the health department approved the centers that they are fit for quarantine or isolation, it's only then that as Public Works we can then procure the sites. So far in our country, the Department of Health has approved 403 facilities that is being assessed with about 37,000 beds. And currently we have used about 136 of those facilities, representing about 12,000 beds. So that is the procedure. The one case that the honourable member referred to, we have got a response, and if the honourable member can write to me, I will send him the response of that facility to those allegations that people were paid extra for a child, and it's not related to this one, but I will certainly give the information. The sites that can be made available and can be made public, it is the responsibility of the Department of Health, because the Department of Health assess and confirm these sites. Now, the Department of Health has also expressed concern that if they release all of the centers where people are going for isolation, that and the stigmatization, related to COVID-19. So it is the Department of Health that must make that decision to make it public. But I can certainly also provide a list of the sites that were approved by the Department of Health to the honourable member after discussing it with the Department of Health.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Sukyas through the visual platform.
Honourable Sukas, Honourable Minister.
Yeah.
My question is a follow-up on what the Honourable Van Staden highlighted. Honourable Minister, there has been a number of complaints related to to some locations and the state of some of the facilities. Now, the Department of Public Works is responsible for the identification and establishment of those quarantine sites. What has been done in terms of those complaints, specifically where sites has been mentioned as undesirable in dangerous locations, and that the state of some of the facilities are not inhumane, and that people refuse to stay there and break their quarantine because they do not want to stay in such facilities. What has been done to rectify those problems?
Honourable Minister.
Honourable member, can I request the honourable member to come with the specific sites, where it is, who are the people that complain? Because in the instances where we receive complaints about the facilities, we also discuss it with the Department of Health, because the Department of Health are always there to provide the medical facilities at the sites. But I won't be able to answer the honourable member, honourable chair, unless I have got the details and the specifics of where these incidents happened. Thank you, honourable chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable S.R. van Schalkwyk through the virtual platform.
Oh.
Honourable van Schalkwyk.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Honourable Minister, for the responses to that question. Honourable Minister, we've received the briefing by the department regarding the quarantine sites in our portfolio committee, and rightfully so, we've received the briefing regarding the private as well as public sites that were available. But what we've noticed, Honourable Minister, is that more private sites were used at exorbitant costs So now we want to know, we've raised that concern, what has been your engagement with the Department of Health, seeing that there's also been upgrades of public sites in order to ensure that more public sites are used to limit costs? I thank you.
Wait for the speaker to get in.
Are you there, Deputy House Chair?
I've been muted. Sorry, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Honourable Member, like I've said, that we do have public sites available, and some of the public sites have been used before. In the case of two public sites, which is the South African Police College and another one in Pretoria, called Salvakop, the Department of Public Works did some renovations and cleaning up and buying bedding and also getting beds in place there to the value of about 5 million rand. It cost us to upgrade those sites. But those sites are all being utilized as and when it's required for the allocation of people who must go into quarantine and isolation. The private sites that we are currently using and have procured is that the rate that National Treasury has negotiated with the industry, that is the range that we pay between 850 and 1,250. And so far, we have spent, out of the projected 27 million rand for quarantine sites, we have spent so far just over 17 million rand. So as and when the sites become available, we will continue to procure. But I do agree that we need to find a bigger balance between public sites and also private sites. Thank you, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Chwaku through the visual platform.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I want to ask the question to the Minister. We've been asking you this
on a
question.
point of order.
We've been asking you
Point
this
of
question.
order. Honourable.
Point of order.
Honourable House Chairperson.
Point of order, Honourable Member.
There's a
the
point
background
of order
of
in
the
the
party,
House.
political party.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. I rise on a point of order because we've had this discussion numerous times. We are not allowed to display our party regalia in Parliament, nor on the public platform, and I would ask that the member not be allowed to speak until the EFF background has been removed.
Also, I didn't see. Sorry, I didn't see that, Chair.
Yes, I think there has been such an argument. I'm
sorry about it. I didn't see that. Sorry.
Has he corrected it? Because I can't see it from my side.
I'm trying to correct it here, sir.
Okay,
It's corrected. It's corrected.
You corrected. Okay. No, thank you very much. Sorry about that because I've been going into many meetings. Sorry, Minister. There is we've been asking as the committee, and also we've sent a message. We actually sent a question from the EFF, and also we've sent from the committee. Can you give us the list of all the quarantine sites, the public sites? We're asking that we want it's a street address and the contact person. We've been asking that since from March and all of that. And also we said to you that you've been prioritizing private, these private, the private quarantine sites. And then why did you actually prioritize them instead of actually using the buildings which are public there? If you're saying that you did not have a chance because COVID was an emergency, we even said, and I even gave a submission to you, that you can get these buildings ready by making sure that you've got all these, you've got the suppliers which are able to fix the building to a point where it's approved by the Department of Health. Can we now, if you have these buildings, can you commit here publicly now that when are you going to give us, so that we're going to go and do our oversight? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair, and thank you, Honourable Member. Like I explained before, Chairperson, that the 403 sites that is being approved by the Department of Health, I will consult with the Department of Health and make that 403 sites available, both public and private. We have not only just chosen to use 4-star and 5-star hotels. Where we have used 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star hotels, you find that some of the people that are sent to those quarantine sites, people coming from overseas, the repatriated ones, when people get into the 1, 2, and 3-star, then they complain about the conditions and they want to then be shifted to 4-star hotels. And again, like we had the incident in Durban, for instance, and afterwards the hotel agreed, because it's a group hotel, agreed to move some of the people to 4-star hotels. So we cannot give people a choice when they arrive in the country as to where they must stay. We just make the sites available. But I commit, Chairperson, that I will consult with the Minister of Health, because the Minister of Health is the department that approved these sites for quarantine. And if the Minister of Health say that we can make those public, we can certainly do so. But I understand the Honourable Member to ask for the public sites. And so we will then give a list of the public sites. That is what the Honourable Member has been asking for. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Question number 231 has been asked by the Honourable Shabalala, the Minister of Public Enterprise. I've been informed that the Minister will be answering questions through the visual platform. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The mandate of the SOE Council, which the President will chair, is to firstly reposition SOEs as effective instruments of economic development. The Council should provide political oversight and strategic management. They will review the SOE's corporate plans and ensure alignment to government priorities, and ensure that appropriate systems are put in place to monitor implementation and the operational and financial performance of SOEs. Secondly, the SOE Council will review the business models, capital structure, and sources of financing for the SOEs, and ensure that the necessary steps are taken for an appropriate capital structure, mix of financing, and funding model for non-commercial SOE activities in its place that enables the entities to operate financially sustainably. Thirdly, reviewing the appropriateness of each SOE's structure and operating model for delivering on the SOE strategy and the developmental role and mandate, as well as whether the sectors within the SOE operates in an appropriately structured way to deliver the optimal economic outcomes and ensure that any required restructuring is implemented. And of course, identify opportunities for private sector participation as well. So it's within this context that the department will be canvassing for funding support for the plan to restructure SAA and indeed for Eskom as well. There are various sources of funding to be considered, including government funding, strategic equity partnerships, and private equity, and other forms of investment. And government will make further announcements in this regard once we have some certainty in due course. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Shabalala from the Chamber.
Shabalala, it's on virtual, Honourable House Chairperson.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
All right. Thank you so much, Minister, for the question, rather the response. The question is, will the SOE Council source any other forms of financial support besides that one of government? And we've often spoken about issues of private equity partnership, but also private partnership. Will government impose any condition with that regard so that we move the agenda of a developmental state? So the question is that, will we have any source of guarantees or other conditions that we impose to these partnerships? That's the first one. Secondly is that we want to know that as government, as we move forward with the state entities, what are the advantages of it being self-sufficient? I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister.
Chairperson and Honourable Chabalala, clearly, let me start with the second question first. Self-sufficiency does mean that you have an SOE that is not reliant on the fiscus, and that should in fact be the objective of running any SOE. We might even have a situation where certain SOEs are not required to, if you like, make the traditional profit, but they must be able to have a balance between the revenue that they generate and the costs that they actually incur. In other instances, you might have SOEs that are commercial, and commercial entities are required to, inverted commas, make a profit, and indeed pay a dividend to government, because that would then assist the fiscus itself. So those would be some of the requirements as we go forward. In respect of the first question, whether other sources of funding would be sought after, in my response, I did say that government will look at its own funding capabilities where that is appropriate, strategic equity partnerships, which is the policy of the governing party, and private equity and other forms of investment where that is appropriate. And of course, the conditions or conditionalities could well be that the developmental aspects of the SOE's mandate must not be compromised in any way. And there are many such formulae, if one calls it that, in examples around the world where golden shares are held, where in the memorandum of incorporation of an SOE and in any partnership, conditions are put forward which would require, for example, an airline to actually flight the flag of a particular country or the brand of a particular country, or require that the head office of a particular entity is based in the country of origin. So there are lots of examples of such conditionalities that could be explored on a case-by-case basis. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Bit through the visual platform.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I'm clear. It has been announced that the State-Owned Enterprises Council is composed of ministers responsible for SOEs and of eminent South Africans with proven leadership and strategic capabilities. One of these council members is the chairperson of Denel. But we see Denel facing immense problems at this stage. It's having its own financial woes and employees have to work for no pay. This does not speak of a company that has the necessary leadership or strategic capabilities. We are now tasking such a person that cannot keep his own house in order to strengthen SOE governance, to address their immediate liquidity challenges and to implement agreed turnaround strategies. Does the Minister think that this is a wise decision and bodes well for the future of this council as well as the SOEs that it has to save? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Minister, if it was audible enough, you can.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Chair. Well, certainly, the Honourable Member is correct about the mix of persons who would be at the discretion of the President appointed to the SOE Council, which would include ministers, people from the private sector, and indeed people from labour unions, federations as well. Secondly, I trust that the Honourable Member is aware of Denel's rather tragic history over the last 10 years or so, which is that during the period of state capture and corruption, Denel was also one of the victims of that phenomenon and had to pay a heavy price where it lost intellectual property. There were certain deals that were entered into, such as Denel Asia, which were attempts at extracting money from Denel and keeping that money overseas. And Denel also lost good management skills and other skills that were dismissed or forced out during that particular period as well. The current board has tried over the last 2 years to set this record straight, and in a very difficult set of circumstances. And that reorientation of Denel and movement into a new strategic direction includes exploring new types of markets, new types of products, and getting greater efficiency and cost effectiveness within the Denel enterprise as well. So I certainly have every empathy, like you do, for workers who do not get paid, but arrangements are being made in order to find internal funding, and hopefully that is concluded sooner rather than later. There's a surplus of funds in a particular quarter within the Denel enterprise, if you like, and hopefully the board is successful in making the changes required in order to access those funds so that people are paid. But fundamentally, I think all South Africans would want Denel to start succeeding, and the chairperson and the board has tried every means in order both to reorientate the enterprise and make it a more commercially oriented entity. And I'm sure they will succeed eventually, and we will assist them in doing so. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable E.M. Buthelezi from the Chamber.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Minister, while we welcome every intervention that seeks to address the challenges faced by SOEs, we also know that most interventions seem to be creating more structures on top of other than dealing with the actual problems. Can the minister then agree with me that the appointment of this council confirms two things? One, the inefficiencies which are there within the existing structure, in particular the boards, and the ineffectiveness of the oversight role by Parliament. And lastly, does this council have the capacity to maintain effective oversight over all SOEs? If not, what is the plan, and can our fiscals afford that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister.
Chairperson, honorable member, thank you for your question. I think it's a very important question that you are asking. I think ultimately the role of the council, as reflected in its terms of reference and the mandate which Cabinet has given this council, is not so much to get itself engaged in the finer details of oversight, but rather, as I pointed out in the initial response, to ensure that the strategic direction, the capital structure of entities, and the reforms that are required in each of these entities is actually progressing along the path that government has set out. And to also look at opportunities, importantly, for rationalizing the number of SOEs, to actually cut down the number of SOEs, to look at ways of merging different SOEs. And we've seen a number of ministers actually leading those processes within their relevant departments and SOEs moving in this particular direction. So you're absolutely right that a far greater effort needs to be made, but this is going to take time. And in the last 2 years, our experience has been that it's not merely boards and top management that matter. Ultimately, in each of these cases, you want the operations of these entities to be run efficiently and productively and effectively and with the right level of skills. Secondly, to make sure that they are revenue generating so that they can meet their basic costs. Thirdly, that they have an appropriate business model which is in line with the market in which the SOE is operating, but also not stuck in its archaic past. And in that regard, there are, as you correctly point out, new sets of skills that are required in various departments to have the kind of diligence that is needed in these instances to maintain proper oversight. And I think each of us are beginning to learn lessons from the last 2 years and develop the capability to ensure that the right things are actually happening. It will take time, but I'm confident that we can. This agenda of reform, restructuring, and rationalizing SOEs is an important agenda for this country. It must remove pressure from the fiscus ultimately, as each of these entities become independent. Ongoing corruption in these entities must also be dealt with so that there's no cronyism involved in the way in which these SOEs operate. And in time, if all of the right things happen, we will have a good set of SOEs to take the country forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next question will be asked by Honorable Kachalia through the virtual platform.
Thank you, House Chair. Given the government has spent over the past 12 years and allocated 162 billion to financially distressed SOEs, of which Eskom accounts for more than 80%, and which SAA since '94 received in excess of 57 billion rands, portions of which clearly could have been more usefully employed in the mitigation of COVID-19 and the effects on industry, has the time not come to cease funding endemic corruption and mismanagement that has resulted in fiscus crippling market failure, and allow the private sector to step in and remedy what a patently incapable state has been unable to deliver, and not continue to do the same thing expecting a different result? The private and hitherto profitable aviation industry could do with some financial assistance instead of plowing money into vanity albatross projects. Does the Minister not agree?
Thank you, Chairperson. I was waiting for your trigger. Sometimes it's very hard to agree with Mr. Kachalia, but let me see where I can agree. In the first instance, let me say that a bit of modesty in the private sector and humility would lead to interesting confessions. Why was Edcon in business rescue, out of business rescue, now back in business rescue, and hopefully out of it again, at the risk of costing 20,000 jobs? In terms of private airlines, if they were that efficiently run, why is Comair in business rescue? That's in private hands. Government has nothing to do with it. And it wasn't only COVID-19 that made the negative impact in this particular instance, as it might have in the aviation industry, both here and elsewhere in the world as well, Chairperson. So should we cease funding? Ideally, yes. That's the objective. The objective of this administration is to make sure that, as I've said repeatedly, that dependence on the fiscus ends. But the panacea isn't necessarily private sector. What I've learned is that what we do require is, whether it's public sector or private sector individuals, in boards, in management, in private sector individuals, who have to assess the commercial understand and take the process further. So commercial knowledge on board is an absolutely crucial ingredient to ensuring that each of these SOEs moves forward. And the objective is one that at least I can agree with Mr. Kachalia, the Honorable Kachalia. And that is that sooner rather than later, the fiscus must be relieved of any responsibility for these SOEs. And as I've said, each SOE must make enough money through whatever process in order to meet the costs that it actually incurs at the end of the day. Honorable Kachalia might want to just check his calculations. If SAA is getting, what, 57 billion, doing the same thing as Eskom got 80%.
Please, Honorable Minister.
Not the same period.
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Minister.
Yes, sir.
Is the Honorable Minister through? I had some problems with the...
Oh, No, I was just, my last point, the calculations that Honorable Kachalia offered might be a bit askew unless I didn't hear him correctly. But that's for a different day. Thank you very much, Honor.
Thank you very much. My apologies. There was a power failure on my side.
Oops. There's not
the question number 253 has been asked by the Honorable F.F. de Freitas to the Minister of Tourism.
Okay.
Who will be answering through the visual platform. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, House Chair, and thank Honorable de Freitas for the question. South Africa is following a risk-adjusted strategy based on levels of lockdowns, not dates. Chairperson, there's an echo. I hope I can be audible. What's happening if you can assist? These levels are defined by relevant epidemiology and are announced by the President regularly. The priority is therefore to resume operation as early as it is safe to do so, as we have been announcing from level 4 to level 3 and enhanced level 3 in terms of South Africa and its visitors. In early April, as part of the industry engagement process, a series of webinars were held with the sector. It included exploring a set of scenarios, high level, medium, and low road, were developed based on several epidemiological factors in South Africa and its source market. The potential for domestic reopening in December 2020 was a potential outcome of the middle road scenario, one of 3 that were explored. This was the product of a collaborative, high-intensity effort by the key tourism stakeholders from both government and private sector. The scenarios were stress-tested against industry consultation, primary surveys, external sources, international benchmarks, and other similar models. To properly baseline the pandemic's impact on South Africa's tourism sector, a modified dynamic input-output table was used to model the effect of exogenous changes in tourism spending on final demand. The analysis approximates COVID-19 impact on tourism at the subsector level and enables estimation of income and employment level based on proposed interventions. The model uses, amongst others, a tourism satellite account for South Africa and domestic tourism survey data to develop a coefficient matrix for domestic and inbound markets split across the major subsectors as specified in the TSA. Supply and demand input variables enable the impact on projected revenue under previous scenarios to be assessed. To mitigate the risk of the pandemic to the tourism sector, we developed a set of protocols which aimed at de-risking the different subsectors and allowing them to come to work to effect, as I said, between level 4, level 3, and enhanced level 3, and we are working on what needs to go into level 2 and level 1. The latter, together with the recognition of the importance of the tourism sector, then resulted in a lot of work, including interventions that we needed to looked at assessment in terms of the impact to jobs, and also what we brought in as relief mechanism, the Tourism Relief Fund, support for freelance tourist guides, support that we brought in terms of relief, giving them financial support for 3 months as tourist guides in our sector, noting that they have not benefited from both UIF or any relief scheme that existed. The work that we did together with the Minister and through where we utilized, brought in TBCSA as a platform to fast-track the applications for our sector in terms of UIF, the quarantine and isolation accommodation establishments, assisting them to gain access to the opportunity in government so that we can preserve jobs. So these are the work that we are doing in order to assist as we continue to ensure that our sector can function and also is able to recover slowly into full operations. Thank you, Madam House Chair. I'm done, House Chairperson.
Honorable Chair, on the visual, please, can we get guidance? Honorable Chair, Ntombela. Next question.
You must unmute.
Members, there's been a slight problem from my side. I'm getting it right. That was the first supplementary question by Honorable Defrators. Now we're moving to the second supplementary question.
House Chairperson, it was the first response. I've not received the supplementary.
But we're still going to the Honorable Defrators.
Yes, please, thank you. May I proceed?
Sorry about that, Honorable Member, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. I have yet to see a more embarrassing response because the Minister has clearly tried to fool this House. First of all, she says that the information is based on epidemiology research, when they have been saying all along that it's time to open up and to the lockdown to stop. Then she talks about webinars, which she may not realize, but I've actually attended most of them, and overwhelmingly the tourism sector has asked to open up. And as she's rightly pointed out, are quite right, happy to cooperate and to put in protocols where needed. She simply has been trying to hoodwink this House when in fact the sector has been asked to open and businesses are being decimated, they're being destroyed daily, and as we count right now, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been lost. So for the Minister to say that it's a plan to save jobs and so forth, she should hang her head in shame. What an embarrassing answer. It has no basis of any truth at all. The question is, what you've asked for a whole lot of, you've quoted a whole lot of research. Please tell us where the research is from.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Honorable Defrators, can I refer you to a statement that was issued by the Western Cape Province on the 18th of June, which Western Cape blamed tourism in terms of its contribution to the peak, to the Western Cape pandemic. That's the first thing. The Premier as well blamed tourism as part of contributing to the high rise number of the pandemic in the Western Cape. If I did not have these problems of the Western Cape being reckless in their statements, in blaming tourism, perhaps we would be far, far better in terms of the tourism coming to life. It is statements like this that you are making that are reckless, that are not collaborative, that are not understanding the work that has been done. You might have attended one webinar. The sector years have consistently asked for us to open in terms of the sector. We've been listening to them. We agree with them that we need to open because the impact to tourism is high. This is the presentation we've done to NCCC, to NetJoy. The issue is balancing between lives and livelihood. As a responsible government, that's why we went out to work together with the sector through TVCSA to develop protocols for the sector so that when we come to life, we do not become a distributing point of the virus. So please stop blame games, stop standing on a glass house and throwing stones. Please be responsible, be a partner in the tourism portfolio and the sector so that we can work together and ensure that we have the tourism sector back to life. Firstly, I would appreciate if you can go to your DA leadership in the Western Cape to tell them to be responsible and not blame a sector for something that they are failing to manage. Thank you.
Thank you. The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honorable August S. through the visual platform.
Thank you, Chairperson. Has the Minister been in discussion with the airline industry and other bodies representing interprovincial travel for tourism? If yes, what are the details of those discussions and has a decision been reached on when domestic travel for leisure purposes will be permitted between provinces. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable August. We are in discussion. You'd note that transport and aviation is the responsibility of Minister Mbalula. So what we do have conversations, interdepartmental engagements, but also through NCCC and NetJoint, those submissions and discussions are having. What will happen is that currently, because we opened for business, and definitely the business travel in terms of interprovincial is happening, the conversations now in the NCCC and between ourselves is to look at how do we de-risk the sectors, how do we ensure that we can protect individuals who are traveling. But while we are concerned about the numbers, you'd know that one of the things that if you compare globally is that many of countries actually started opening more broadly in terms of activities when their curve was flattening. We have a challenge of the numbers continue to rise, and this is what Minister Mkhize has been raising. So most of the things, they get assessed as in when we go in. We look at the environment, we receive the reports from NetJoint provinces, including from the health portfolio to say this is what is concerning them, and we propose from portfolios what we want to see as developing in terms of traveling, for example, like you are mentioning, in terms of domestic leisure. So we do not have currently the dates nor the time when this will be opened. Will be guided by the Minister of Health together with the discussions at NetJoints led by Minister of Transport, and will support them as soon as they are ready, because this will benefit and will add value to what we have done currently in terms of domestic market and domestic tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Ngumalo from the Chamber.
Ngiyathokoza Sihlalo, mhlonishwa uNgqongqoshe. In light of the global evidence that most tourism practices focus solely on income generation and labor market maintenance without considering the detrimental environmental implications, has the department contemplated reconfiguring the South African tourism space with responsible tourism being featured in that strategy going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
I beg you to hear the member.
Babu Ngumalo, can you try again?
With pleasure.
Honourable Ngumalo.
With pleasure, Chair.
Yeah, about that.
Chair, Honourable Minister, I was saying that in light of the global evidence that most tourism practices focus solely on income generation and labor market maintenance without considering the detrimental environmental implications, has the department contemplated reconfiguring the South African tourism space with responsible tourism being featured in that strategy going forward? I hope the Minister captured me this time.
Ngiyabonga.
Honourable Minister.
Mangibonge Mhlonishwa Ngumalo for the question. Though it's a new question, but I'll respond, House Chair. We do have a strategy around responsible tourism. We are part of the global community, for example, with the UNWTO, where we are practicing responsible tourism. We're looking at various ways of ensuring that we can be able to sustain the environment. For example, when we had our Meetings Africa this year in February, we had ensured that the exhibition actually are environmental friendly. We even gave awards to those who have complied. So it was, the exhibition had to comply with reusable material in terms of what they brought. So part of that is to be able to show that we do support and promote environmental tourism, sustainable tourism, but also ensure that we can protect our environment. So there's quite a lot of work, if we are able to be given an opportunity, we can provide in detail some of the work that we are doing, the strategy that we have in place, and also the work that we have done. I've just mentioned one, which is in Tourism Meetings Africa that was held this year in February. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable H.O. Mkhaliti through the visual platform.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Kangweni will take that question of Honourable Kalipi.
You're welcome.
Thank you. What is the number of businesses that have received the assistance of the 50,000 out of the 200 million that was allocated towards the COVID-19 relief fund? And are they black-owned from villages, townships, or small towns? And how are you going to ensure, Minister, that workers were not dismissed due to COVID-19 when companies have claimed from the relief fund? Thank you.
The 22 million.
Honorable Minister.
200 million, you must listen.
Thank you very much, House Chair and Honorable Sangwini. That's actually quite, I don't know, House Chair, you'll have to guide me. What Honorable Member has asked me, it's a question that relates, that has been asked by Honorable Muteka, which is question 219 on the question paper. So I don't know, House Chair, I request guidance from yourself and the table, how should I deal with this? Because there is a question on the question paper that relates to the question that the Honorable Member has asked. So I'll take guidance. I do have a response, but I'm just flagging that it's a question on the question paper.
Oh, okay, Honorable Minister, you can lay out your answer. You can respond.
Okay, in terms of the 200 million that we announced for SMMEs, and actually in terms of the benefits, we've so far approved 2,112 applicants. Out of this, 51.6% of them are black-owned. In terms of them being from villages and townships, I can indicate, for example, House Chair, in Eastern Cape, we have 151 companies that have applied. Out of this, we do have companies that comes from Kwechane location, Alfred Nzo, Baysville, Bizana, Sterling Tsolo, Matatiele, Mdantsani, Mtata, Nahunda, Bangulu, Butterworth, Port Alfred, Mount Frere, Queenstown, Strakespruit, Witten Gate, and Vincent. And another example is in the Limpopo. We've been able to already award 107 black businesses that are coming from Malamulela, Mankweng, Mukopani, Senwaba, Arwana, Seshiro, Tokwane Village, Libuakomu, Zaneni, Velavela, Hoedspruit, Lutstrichat, Musina, Palabura, Sibasa, Toyando, and Zaneni. So we've not only focused in urban areas, but we can assure the House that we are focused in all the provinces, 9 provinces. We do have the information. 9 provinces, we do have that breakdown, and we can give that actually even from the small villages, for example, in Free State as well, we do have from Kutadichaba. So you do have small villages, areas, site, remote communities where small businesses have applied, and they are continuing to receive. So out of these ones that I'm reading, House Chairperson, these ones have received already. There are 50,000 grant that was allocated. You'd know that we were delayed on House Chair and honorable members by a court case that was brought by Solidarity and Afri Forum, where they believed that we should not follow government policy. Instead, the court at least stood with us on our side and defended and did indeed made a judgment to say we are on the right side of the law and we should be able to worry about those who are previously disadvantaged. It's not being racist, and I can assure the House that in this allocation as well, we've not been able to see only previously disadvantaged communities, but all including white companies that are BEE compliant have received the support from the Department of Tourism. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your indulgence. Thank you so much. We now go to question number 243, which has been asked by the Honorable Thring to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, but I'm informed that it's now the Deputy Minister who will respond to the questions. The Honorable Deputy Minister.
Sorry, Chair. Point of order, please. Point of order from the House. Point of order, I just would like an explanation where the Minister is. She was attendant earlier, and now she appears not to be to respond to this question. Can we have an explanation as to what has happened to her? Thank you.
I can't hear what you're saying, Honorable Member, but the message that I have is that the Minister of Public Works is boarding a plane and the Deputy Minister will answer further questions. That's all I have. But I think the Deputy Minister is also competent enough to answer these questions.
House Chairperson.
Can we allow the Minister to respond, please?
House Chairperson, on a point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order, Honourable Member?
Thanks, House Chairperson. These question sessions have been put in the Minister's diary for some time. She should have known that it only ends at 5 o'clock.
The Deputy Minister has the right.
Honourable Member Zulu, please allow him to speak.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Honourable Member.
If you can kick her out the session, that would be useful. She knew that this was going to end at 5 o'clock, and she should have only boarded a flight after 5 o'clock. She is making her logistical incompetencies our problem, and that is absolutely not acceptable.
That's an insult.
Honourable Member,
Chairperson.
I understand. Are you through?
No, I'm not, Chairperson.
It's because you allow them to just say anything they like. The Minister
you're
is
just
busy,
saying
the
whatever
Deputy
you want.
Minister is there. Allow the Deputy Minister to answer the question.
I will allow them as long as I
is absolutely out of order.
I would request you, Honourable Zulu, to please give us a chance and let the flow of the debate go on, please. Can you allow that? Honourable Member, I failed to understand what you were saying, the last part of what you were saying.
Please, can I finish now? Without being,
and I hope
disturbed by Minister Zulu. Now, can I please finish without being disturbed by Minister Zulu? Now, Chair.
Go ahead, Honourable Member.
Now, Chairperson, I think that this definitely needs to be referred to the Chief Whips Forum. The behaviour of Minister DeLille is simply unacceptable. She has a responsibility to Parliament, and if she wants to jet around the country, she mustn't do it on our time.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I heard the core of your concern. It will be taken up with the relevant officers. Thank you very much. We are now at question number 243 that has been asked by the Honourable Spring to the Minister of Public Works, and the Deputy Minister is expected to respond. Honourable Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The answer to the question is that even though there was a plan to reconfigure the IDT into a government component in the latter part of the 5th administration, there was, however, a change of plan which is attributed to the following. Firstly, the country's fiscal constraints. Secondly, government's position to review non-performing state-owned companies that also rely on government for financial assistance. Thirdly, the financial sustainability challenges at IDT. Fourthly, the governance challenges at IDT. And based on those four, and also on the fact that in their strategic plan, by their own admission.
Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, we've lost you. Honourable Deputy Minister, we have lost you.
I'm still here, Chairperson. Am I audible now? Am I audible now, Chairperson?
Am I offline? What's happening?
Yeah, we can.
Deputy Minister.
We can fully hear.
Thank you. Now, Deputy Minister. Based on the four advanced arguments
am I audible?
Points of evidence that I've raised, and the fact that the IDT itself, by their own admission, where they stated that doing more of the same
will not produce different results.
If I'm audible, honorable members, I'm sorry about that. There's a power failure from my side again. I will allow the first supplementary question, which is going to be asked by the honorable three
on a point
through the
of
visual
order.
platform. We'll try to sort it out in the
On a
meantime.
point of order.
Point of order, Chair. Honorable Chair Ntombela. Honorable Chair Ntombela, I'm in the house. Honorable Chair Ntombela, Mashiko, mute. Honorable Chair Ntombela. Honorable Chair Ntombela.
Honorable members.
Honorable Member Chair Ntombela.
I can't hear the honorable minister.
No, we let me think. Honorable Ntombela. Can I sit over there? Can I sit over there?
Honorable Chair.
Honorable Ntombela.
Oh my God.
Honorable Ntombela, the Deputy Minister is on the platform.
What incompetence is this now?
In trying to assist you, Chair, can you request all members on the
Honorable
virtual
members, I am totally disconnected.
You are totally disconnected, but request members to mute.
But if the
Honorable Deputy Minister, go ahead in responding to questions.
No, but Honorable Chair, honorable members, on a point of order. No, Chair, I think let us be practical here. Let us not proceed for the sake of proceeding under erratic circumstances. The House Chairperson is
why can't
Honorable Mashiko, please.
Honorable Mashiko, please mute your phone. Honorable Mashiko from the ANC, can you please mute your mic?
Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister.
Honourable, I mean, I don't know who to address because we don't have a chair of the House at the moment, and therefore the sitting is actually not taking place.
Yeah.
The mace is in front of the House with no chair. This is an unprecedented thing that's happened in Parliament. So, I mean, we have to decide whether or not the mace, we ask for the mace to be removed, because this is abomination of Parliament. The mace cannot be in place without a chair.
Okay, I'm chairing now.
You can't chair.
No, I'm chairing you. I'm chairing you three.
You don't
No. You are misunderstanding me. I'm chairing. No, listen.
Can this woman just please put a mask on?
No, I'm chairing these
For the sake
recommendations.
of the country, can Honourable Zulu
The
put a
second
mask on?
supplementary question will be going to the Honorable S.G. Graham
Honourable members,
through the virtual platform.
There are suggestions on the floor that in the light of what is happening now, Honorable Shengwa is suggesting that let's adjourn because of this technicality. And I see Honorable Swart.
Chair, I was still on the floor, but...
No, but you have made your suggestion.
No, the person you saw would
What is this chaos that is happening now? Exactly what we said last time. Let there be two chairs. Where's the chair that was supposed to be the National Assembly?
Chairperson,
but where are you,
this is
No, what I wanted
Honorable members,
Chief Whip, what I wanted to say was,
this is like they could simply solve the problem.
She went to another commitment to Honorable Muroto.
Honorable members.
Because Honorable Deputy.
Honorable members.
Yeah, now we are in order. Now we're in order. Can we be seated?
Honorable members. Please take your seats and mute your mics. I recognize the Honorable Deputy Minister of Public Works who will respond to the question. The Honorable Deputy Minister.
Chairperson, on a point of order. On a point of order, Chair. we are having problems with...
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Deputy Minister, let me just take the point of order. What is the point of order, Honorable Member?
Chairperson, before you proceed or assume the chairs you just have, can you be clarified on the process moving forward? In the event that you are chairing from the virtual platform, the previous chair had a problem, there's no chair in the House, the Deputy Speaker had a problem earlier on. How do we proceed? Otherwise, we're making a mockery of the sitting. So can that be clarified first so that we know what's going to be the procedure should we run into these technical problems? But to just skirt over these issues in
the procedure is that... Thank you, Honourable Member. Take your seat now. You made your point. Honourable Members, we will now continue to listen to the Deputy Minister, who is busy responding to the question, and I'll chair from the virtual platform. The Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I've highlighted the 4 scenarios that existed in IDT, and I'm saying, therefore, based on those 4 scenarios, and based on the fact that in their own strategic plan, the IDT, by their own admission, they stated that doing more of the same will not produce different results. And at which point they also presented as one of the options for the IDT engaging in a responsible process of closures. I'm now quoting them verbatim. It was then decided that an exit strategy should be pursued. It has always been, on the second point of that question, it has always been the intention to bring these matters to Parliament once a clear position had been adopted by Cabinet on the IDT, which is not the case at the moment, as the exit strategy is still work in progress and is yet to be presented to Cabinet. The Portfolio Committee learned about these issues in the media following unsolicited media enquiries, which the department had to respond to avoid the media publishing an incorrect narrative. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Minister. I now recognize the Honourable Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Minister, it is well known that the IDT was established in 1990 as a grant-making agency with an endowment of some 2 billion operating as a trust. When the mandate of the IDT changed in 1997 as a state infrastructure development entity, and in 1999 as a Schedule 2 public entity, no additional funding was made from the fiscus, and many client departments refused to make payments for services rendered. It appears that the IDT was then set up to be a failure. The PMTE is facing similar financial challenges of non-payment. Minister, Deputy Minister, when the announcement was made of an exit strategy to IDT, not a single political party represented on our portfolio was happy with the process. Now, what lessons have been learned from the outplay of these events to ensure that it is not repeated, and what interventions have been put in place to avoid practices of corruption and maladministration that have been pointed out by the Auditor General? I thank you.
Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Let me, on the outset, indicate that as we briefed the committee last week, that the work of the committee, that is the interdisciplinary committee that we have deployed to IDT, is still working on the exit strategy. Some of the lessons learned would be that we do need, yes, good governance in our institutions, but moving forward, we also need to ensure that we strengthen our oversight abilities. But as we are saying, there is work in progress in terms of the final outcomes of the exit strategy working team.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honorable Graham.
Thank you, Chair. In a little town called New Bethesda, unemployment levels are extreme and work opportunities are beyond scarce. EPWP is one of the few means for folks to put food on their table. New Vicky Creche, an NPO, facilitates one of these programs implemented by the IDT. Sadly, this program is so poorly managed by the IDT that last year the project only started in November. Participants earned money for a measly 4 months. We are now almost at the end of the first quarter of the new financial year, and this program is delayed again. People are starving and no feedback is forthcoming. Deputy Minister, what guarantee can you give that despite imminent closure, the IDT will implement and manage these EPWP non-state sector programs for this financial year? Thank you.
The Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I must indicate that the program EPWP is a program of the Department of Public Works, and it is its responsibility. We have engaged with the team, the interdisciplinary task team that we have deployed to work on the exit strategy. That program cannot be stopped because already the NPOs that are facilitating the projects on the ground have already been appointed. And therefore, we can't just stop it. But more than that, it's government program and policy to continue with the program. And therefore, as part of the exit strategy, we will finalize, as we finalize that work, we will determine where to locate that program, but it cannot be stopped, and it will not be stopped, as it helps our communities, and it is a government program. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Minister. The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honourable Sowisa.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, Deputy Minister, it seems as if it's becoming a norm that the Department of Public Works always give different answers when we get to different platforms. My question is, what mechanisms will be put in place by your department to monitor progress in speedy delivery of infrastructure by using agencies as consultants while none was utilized with the IDT? Due to the fact that we know that there has been a lack of monitoring, and at the present moment in your budget as a department, you have made a decrease in funding of monitoring and evaluation. Thank you, Chair.
The Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chair. The work of the IDT, or the work that was performed by IDT, is not going to be closed or thrown in the dustbin. That work is still going to continue. That is the provision of social infrastructure to our communities. Again, that is the mandate of the Department of Public Works. And IDT was an implementing agent. But that does not take away the responsibility of the program, of the department to run with the program. And therefore, we are re-engineering our department as now infrastructure development is part of the mandate of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. So that work will continue. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
The last supplementary question is to be asked by the Honourable E.F. Matabula. Honourable members on the virtual platform. Honourable Matabula.
Honourable House Chair, it seems like Honourable Matabula is experiencing connection challenges. I will be taking the question from the House. It's Honourable Gola Ngola.
Please proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Honourable Deputy Minister, what undertakings are being given that this will not occur in the near future, and what consequence management has been effected? Thank you very much, House Chair.
The Honourable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Even though I'm not very clear in terms of the question, when the Honourable Member that this will not recur and is not clear on what is this, I will assume that this refers to the reorganization of IDT or the exit of IDT. And if that is so, we are doing what one would be saying is insourcing, that is strengthening the capacity and the ability of the department to deliver infrastructure and ensuring that that happens within the range where our eyes for monitoring would be able to monitor. And therefore, that work will continue, as I've said earlier, Honourable Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Minister. Thank you for your response. Honourable members, I wish to apologise for what happened earlier when the Deputy Minister tried to answer the question and the Honourable Ntombela was unfortunately no longer on the virtual platform due to technical glitches. As all of you can see, I have allowed the time to go over 5 o'clock to take care of the technical glitch that occurred. The time allocated to questions has now expired and all outstanding replies will be printed in Hansard. The business of the House is now concluded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairperson.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, honourable members. Abanye bayamutwa, abanye abamutwa. Siyayibona.
Inja, kodwa lindiwe. Uwe phela ongamute